All right. Hey,
Hey, Nikki.
welcome. You found me.
I did. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. I'm freshly studied up on all the topics we're going to cover today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, everybody, say hello to my friend, Dr. Blayne Mosachek.
How's the shack? There you go.
There we go. Okay. This is the poultry doc, and I'm going to let him introduce his background with chickens a little bit here. But he has an Instagram page here and a Facebook page called The Poultry Doc. You can see him here live, so you can go and follow his page. And then he also has a Facebook group, and that is called Backyard Chickens Ask the Poultry Doc. So make sure you get all that in there, and you're going to be able to ask questions and find out all sorts of information about chicken keeping there. So do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, everybody, thanks for joining. So, yeah, as Nikki said, I'm Dr. Blayne Mosachek, and got a long history of being a poultry veterinarian. So that's my background, board certified poultry vet, and recently made the decision. Actually, about 6 months ago, we started the Facebook group page to help kind of bring that medicine, that level of medicine to the backyard chicken space. And that's what thepoultrydoc.com is all about. So I encourage you all to go there and check it out. We've got some interesting things to provide veterinary medicine right now to select folks out there. And we'll be expanding our services, providing vaccines and other products to help out the backyard chicken space. So go check it out. And I'm excited about today, answering some of these questions.
Yeah, so I was talking before you popped on here about why we started Purely Vetted. This is going to be hopefully a monthly live that we come on and do with different poultry topics. Today we're talking about all the natural remedies that you guys hear about and whether or not they work or if they're worth your time, your investment in helping your chickens, or if it's a waste of money. So I brought the poultry vet on here, a poultry doc on here, because he has more information about this than I do. Whenever I see something that somebody posts, just sprinkle this in your feed to help with this or that, my brain always goes, are there any studies on this? Is this actually going to work? Because I don't want to come on my, large platform and say, do this and it'll help, and then it doesn't help, and your chickens either continue to be sick or, you've wasted your money. I don't want to do that to my followers. So that's where my brain goes. And the scientific evidence gets really confusing. So I'm so glad Dr. Blayne is here today to help us navigate through this. So we're just going to get started. If you have questions while we're talking, go ahead and ask them. We're going to try to get to some of those, but we don't want to stay on here all day long. So we can always come back and answer those later too. Okay, you ready?
Yeah. So I'll preface this before we get started. I've looked at like 100, well, the search that I did to find today's data comes from about 140 something different journal articles, right? And tried to focus on poultry specifically in the data that we looked at. Now you can't find data specific to poultry for everything. So what we'll talk about today, or what I'll speak of, is what the preponderance of evidence would suggest, right? So sure, you'll be able to go out and probably find some data that would maybe say otherwise of what we say today. But what I talk about is going to be what's generally considered acceptable for whatever we're talking about. So,
Okay, awesome.
let's dive in.
Okay, the first one that my followers always ask me, and I have so many DMs on this one. People want to know if red pepper flakes are useful when you add them to your chicken feed. Now, I've seen people say that it helps deworm your chickens, that it boosts their immune system, that it will change their yolk color, and then also I've seen it helps like deter pests and rodents and things like that. So what do you have for us on red pepper flakes?
Yeah, well, let's dive in all three of those. So red pepper flakes, I hear it all the time too, and you'll see many products online advocating for it as a dewormer. Let's talk about the ability for it to add color to yolk. That's certainly true, right? So there are capsaicin and carotenoids that are in red chili flakes that add that red and yellow color to eggs. They're fat soluble, so they're easily absorbed into the yolk. Some of the data would suggest, like at its highest level, about 2 to 2.5 grams a day would provide the maximal color. Kind of over that, you really start to lose an effect. But any amount will influence color. Marigold Pell is another one, right? That would add yellow color to pigments, or to the egg yolk. In regards to its ability to be an anthelmintic, right, which is a fancy word for dewormer, there's really no data to suggest that. And the few studies that do exist on its ability to do that use extracts from red chili flakes or from capsaicin containing products. And so they're extremely high amounts of those compounds that have been shown in rare studies to cause some, or to produce those anthelmintic effects. And I can tell you from personal experience, some of these products have existed in the commercial space, or they've been attempted to be milled into feed, and they're so, I won't say toxic, but they're irritating that the folks at the feed mill trying to make the feed, they can't take it because of the dust. It's a respiratory irritant, so they really haven't found a space in commercial or in general milling of feed.
So in the any of the little minimal studies you found, it's like a highly concentrated form of it. Is it going to do the same thing if I, go get red pepper flakes from, Walmart or Giant Eagle and then put it into my chicken food? Is that going to have the same effect?
It will not. No, red pepper flakes and the ability for it to prevent or even for sure treat worms is not true. So that one's been debunked. There's, again, no data to support that.
Okay, so if your chickens have worms, don't go buy red pepper flakes. It's not going to
help. One thing we want to do is really not endanger the welfare of our animals, right? And so this is one that, there's many of these products that advocate for specific functions or claim specific functions. And when they don't do that, right, and they rely on emotion of people rather than science, we really endanger the welfare of our birds. And so that's something you'll find the information that we put at the poultry doc. We try to debunk some of these things and give you real accurate information. On the third one, Nikki mentioned on its ability to deter rodents. I didn't really find, honestly, I didn't look for this one because I've got personal experience with it too. This is how we try to keep squirrels out of our bird feeder, right? Is adding a little red chili, not necessarily flakes, but chili powder. And sometimes it works. Sometimes I think the squirrels, I'm down in Central Texas. They may like hot food. I don't know. It doesn't work very well sometimes.
I see somebody asked, with the birds and the mice. I am going to test that one out, so you guys stay tuned. I have some cameras I'm going to set up on some chicken feed and put it out where the mice like to hang out. So we'll see, do they eat it or not? But I saw somebody ask, does it add any nutritional value? And I for that, I feel like, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, if you have a balanced chicken feed that is balanced nutritionally for your chickens, and then you're adding stuff in, does that kind of throw off the balance? Are you harming?
That's 100. You're 100% right. And so if you look at that statistic that said 2 grams, right, or which would be about 2% of 2 to 2 and a little bit less than 2% of the diet. Now you've got to overcome or make up for those calories that you lost in adding the chili flake, right? So you're unbalancing that balanced diet. And many of the diets that are fed today or produced, like our, what I would call it, reputable feed manufacturers, are already adding pigments, whether it be marigold or maybe even in some cases some chili flakes. So they've already been accounted for in the diet, so that the space that they took up from a caloric or nutrient standpoint has been compensated for.
Okay, so we don't want to throw off that balance by adding too much extras in there.
Exactly.
Okay, you ready for the next one?
Let's go. Yeah.
All right, I will say I have no experience with this one because it seems really sticky to me, and maybe I'm wrong with chickens and their feathers, but a lot of people are using Manuka honey to help with wound care. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so Manuka honey is interesting. Honey in itself has antibacterial properties. Just simply being a sugar doesn't have, or it's mainly sugar, it doesn't have a lot of water. And so there's an osmotic effect that honey has where it creates, while you don't think of honey as being dry, it really is, and it pulls water out of bacteria. So that is one way it inhibits bacterial growth. It's also relatively acidic, and it doesn't support bacterial growth in that acidic environment. And then lastly, it's methylgaloxol is the actual active compound in Manuka honey. So when you find a bottle of Manuka honey, usually on the label, there'll be an MGO rating, right? And I'm not familiar with all the levels and whatnot, but the higher that rating, that MGO actually has antibacterial properties. And so there's a lot of things we're going to talk about today and how they're antibacterial, but most of them will disrupt the cellular wall of bacteria. And this is one way that the MGO, it does that as well too. So now there are some specific differences between, honey's not all honey. So Manuka honey and the honey you buy off the shelf are very different. Manuka honey and the Manuka honey that you eat are also different. When we're talking about Manuka honey, it's important that we use the medical grade Manuka honey because that's been gamma irradiated, which is a fancy way of saying it's been sterilized without heating. And so it still keeps all those properties, yet it's gone through the process to remove any bacterial or fungal contamination.
Okay, that's good information.
Yeah. I will, and one other thing was interesting, you know, when I was looking into this, is that store-bought honey, I think it was like 69% of the store-bought honey had bacterial or fungal contamination in it. So again, it's important that we not use regular honey. And I think I've made that mistake too. I mean, I've talked about Manuka honey on our within our forums, and I've probably made the mistake once or twice of not specifying the medical grade Manuka honey. So I've got to do a better job of doing that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, the next one on our list, this is going to be a very popular one with probably lots of questions and thoughts on it. So before I say that, you guys here are watching live, I appreciate you so much. If you have time, either right now or when you're done watching this, to share this out to your friends and family, you can post it on your Facebook page, on your Instagram page, in your stories, whatever. I really appreciate that. That helps us reach more poultry keepers. So the next question we have is about apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, so I get this one all the time, and I think there's not a post that's put on a forum somewhere that somebody doesn't suggest the use of apple cider vinegar. So there are some positive effects of organic acid. Actually, there are several studies that have shown benefits of organic acid. Now, that's a general class of ingredients, right? Apple cider vinegar specifically, or acetic acid, is really the active component there, is not nearly as effective as some of the other ones when we're talking about formic acid or butyric acid or propionic acid. Those three specifically are well documented in the data to provide positive effects. So it could be improving gut health or digestive ability. They all work really well. They also can inhibit bacterial growth. We could go deep into the chemistry about pKa and how they actually work, but for the most part, the weaker the acid, the less likely it is to inhibit bacteria. Acetic acid, or what we find in apple cider vinegar, is pretty weak in that sense, and so it's not very effective. Some of the other ones do provide that better antibiotic effect or antibacterial effect.
Okay. So do you see a lot of people just like, I always see this in forums and in comments and stuff, people, anytime there's a sick chicken or a stressed chicken or anything else, people are saying, put some apple cider vinegar in their water. Do you find that to be like not the cure-all? You know, are you like hitting your head, or are you like, yeah, it could help a little bit?
You know, it's definitely not the cure-all. You have to approach it from, and this goes with anything you're putting in the water specifically, right? A lot of times if we're medicating an animal, in this case a chicken, having that animal stay hydrated is extremely important, probably even more so than feed, if we're having to pick one, right? If you add things to the water, there's a potential there to make it taste bad, right? Or maybe it's too acidic, and now you restrict that. The bird doesn't want to drink anymore, so you exacerbate the problem. So we want to make sure that if you do add something like apple cider vinegar, it's at a very small amount, so a low dose. And I'm not going to give doses here, but I mean, I've read things where it's like 2/3 water, 1/3 apple cider vinegar. That's way too high, right? So apple cider vinegar really is, it's a sort of a flavor enhancer. So you'll see commercially, this is one interesting thing about when we practice commercial medicine, is that we're looking at millions of animals, right? So we can make some minor changes in a diet or in the drinking water and see if they have positive effects. I can tell you apple cider vinegar, it's used, I'll find it on some farms where people are using it and they think it increases water intake, which we see that it could be true, but it also, if birds drink more water, they're eating more, so they're staying healthier that way. Again, if you actually look at the data and how well those birds perform, we can't find a difference in the data whether they do any better or not. We often say you're just treating the owner, right? Treating the farmhand or farm people rather than treating the birds.
Okay, so you don't think it's like a, you know, some people are putting, like someone here said, when they were using it, they were doing a teaspoon per gallon of water. Is that doing anything or a waste of time?
I'll go back to the data and say there's nothing to show that it supports that. That it supports. I mean, again, they're not hurting if they're using it at that lower dose, right? There's what I was going to say. There is lost my train of thought. Go to the next. Not the next one.
Okay.
I remember. There's some folks that will talk about how it could be dangerous, right? You were giving an acid in the water and you're going to damage the crop. That is not true. So it's a weak acid. Organic acids are weak acids. The pH of the crop is around 3 to 4. As you go further, the next step down is the glandular stomach. And there you're looking at a pH of 2 to 3 before it gets to the gizzard and starts going back up. So the intestinal tract, especially that upper intestinal tract of birds, are really designed to handle lower pH. They're well buffered. So we're not worried about causing any sort of damage to the crop by giving it. So you're not hurting anything there.
Okay. Yeah, so I see a lot of people commenting on things and saying, you know, I use apple cider vinegar or I use red pepper flakes and my chickens have never been sick or have never had worms. And in my brain, I think, well, I never use apple cider vinegar and I never use red pepper flakes and my chickens have also never had worms, except for a rescue hen that I brought in one time who was living outside in the woods. So what do you say to that? Is, you know, are they wrong, or, you know, are those things doing anything for, you know, parasites, or is it just kind of like all in the head?
Yeah, you'll hear me say a lot on the forums is that correlation is not a sign of causation, right? So just because something happened doesn't mean it happened because you did whatever it was. It takes, you know, clinical trials and things to establish an actual effect. And in the case of apple cider vinegar and many of the things we're going to talk about today, those just aren't there. So yeah, if you give an apple cider vinegar and your illness goes away, or the chicken's illness goes away, doesn't necessarily mean that the two were related.
Okay. So no proof of it.
No.
You know, someone says, should I put it in or not? You know, it's really your choice as long as you're
Yeah.
doing it at a correct dosage, you're not going overboard, but there is no proof to support that, you know, you're going to heal anybody. I did see somebody comment, I have to read this. It says, this dude, Blayne the poultry doc, is sharp. That's why we brought him on.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You know,
Yes.
I'll add one other thing to that is when we do put things in the water, right? Apple cider vinegar, again, it's going to lower the pH a little bit. That's going to slow bacterial growth and prevent things from growing. You know, there are things people put in the water that could actually grow bacteria. So that's one of the things. We're not going to talk about it today here, but you'll hear sugar, for example, is one thing that people may add to the water. And that may help in scenarios where, you know, birds are really low energy and there's something that's stressed them out. But you have to remember adding sugar in this particular example will help, not help, but it will cause bacteria to grow in the water. So if we're not doing a good job of maintaining water cleanliness and sanitation, that in itself can cause other issues too. So we just have to be careful what we put in the water and what we feed the birds.
Okay, awesome. I love that you guys are asking questions. Keep doing that. We may not get to all of them in today's live because we are on a little time limit here, but it is going to help us for our next one of what we're going to cover. So please ask them and we will try, if they're matching up with what we're talking about, to get to them. The next thing I have on my list of questions is oregano. So I see a lot of people putting the same thing, going to the grocery store, buying the big thing of oregano, you know, seasoning. You see a lot of jokes about people saying you're pre-seasoning your chickens, you know, that's going around right now, but putting that into their feed to help with their immune system.
Yeah, so oregano, most of all the studies that we're going to find that were publicly available data are all based on carbachol and thymol. And so those are extracts of, or what we find in oregano essential oil. And they're also found in, you know, the off-the-shelf spice aisle, right? You can find them in there, but they're very, very low concentrations, you know, less than 2%. I looked at the data and tried to do some an analogy of like, okay, if I did use off-the-shelf from the spice aisle, how much would I have to feed a day? And it was something like 6 grams, which would be like over a quarter cup of oregano. And that was at the highest concentration that you can find. And the other thing too about oregano that you buy in the spice aisle, that it's all over the place in terms of its concentration. So anywhere between less than 1% to, oh, it was smaller than that. I'm thinking about the amount you would need. It was less than a gram to over 6 grams of oregano to accomplish the same thing. So it's widely variable, and it also is it breaks down really quickly. So those essential oil compounds that we find in oregano that give them the carbachol and thymol that give them those antibacterial properties, they break down really quickly. So if we find commercial products, they usually have stabilizers in them to prevent them from breaking down. But to answer your question, as far as like immune stimulants, I can't find any data to suggest that it's an immune stimulant.
Okay, especially not like the powder or the flakes.
Yeah. Not the powder. Again, the data for the most part is going to go back to those products that are all from extract. So oregano essential oil, those thymol and carbachol products that I talk about, they have what we mentioned earlier about the ability to interrupt the cell wall of bacteria. So they do have specific effects on E. coli and Salmonella. And in many studies, they show the effect of perfringens, Clostridium perfringens. So oregano essential oil can be used to help stabilize the gut and prevent some of the overgrowth of bad bacteria in the gut. So not a bad thing, oregano in itself, but the products that actually provide that effect are difficult to find, or they're very variable in their ability to do that.
Somebody said, what if we grow the oregano and other herbs near their run? Like if they're out foraging and they find some oregano and eat it.
Yeah, this is one of those things where it's not going to hurt, right? Having that out there is a great supplement. But again, the amount that they would need is pretty high, right? And again, that's going to take away from that blended diet or well-balanced diet that they should have. And it's also important to mention too that the differences in oregano, or the differences in types of oregano, really vary on that level of the thymol and the carbachol, those two active ingredients in it. So they can be really all over the place, just depending on what oregano you're growing.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. We like that. Okay, the next one I have is pumpkin seeds. Now, I just had a friend of mine drop off all of their pumpkins they decorated their porch with, and they're on my porch. I feed them to my goats, I feed them to my chickens. But I do see a lot of people saying that the pumpkin seeds, or some people even say just the pumpkin, will deworm chickens. So tell us your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, so I had to dive into the data on this one. So cucurbitacin is the actual active ingredient there. And so that compound is actually found more so in, I don't know if we call them heritage pumpkins, but pumpkins today have been selected to be tastier, right? We cook with them and we do other things with them. Well, the cucurbitacin, actually the way to say it, is really bitter. And so these newer pumpkins are the ones that we eat today, probably the ones that you find and that you're carving, have been sort of selected to not have as much, right? So one, if there were an actual effect, the pumpkins that we have available to us today don't really contain very much of that active ingredient. And then if we back up and we actually look at, is that compound, does it have an effect? There's one or two studies that may point to it in its extracted form. So they've used ethanol extraction to pull out that compound and then provide it actually at a pretty high rate that wouldn't be feasible really. And they've shown some minor effects. So if you look at the data around pumpkin seeds whole or pumpkin seed powder, any of that, there's several studies that show zero effect of feeding pumpkin seeds.
Okay.
In regards to its like anthelmintic ability, right, to prevent worms.
So is there anything natural that you would get if your chickens had a worm load? Or are you going to the dewormer?
Yeah, my veterinary mind says I'm going to look at the data, and the data, one, is it approved for use in poultry, which we have one of those products available to us. And there's been extensive work done on the efficacy and safety and withdrawal of those products, right, if they're labeled for that use in the market. And so that's where I'm going to go. That's the treatments that I'm going to suggest. So long answer to no.
Yeah. So if your chickens have worms and you are physically seeing worms in their droppings, they have a heavy load, and pumpkins are not going to help. Like pumpkin seeds, any of that stuff. Like you're going to have to treat that. Somebody in the comments said, I grow my own pumpkins. Are those okay? Yeah, totally. If you're growing pumpkins, like chickens can eat pumpkins. They love them. Obviously, don't overdo it because you don't want to take away from their nutritional feed balancing. But of course, they love them. It's a great entertainment, especially this time of year. We grow them too, and then we save them like in our cellar, and they last almost all winter long, and we can give them to our chickens to kind of keep them entertained and happy. All right, the next one is also a little bit about deworming. And I'm not going to try to ruffle any feathers here, but diatomaceous earth is one that I see recommended a lot for chickens, whether it be adding it to their feed for deworming or putting it in like their dust bath to get rid of mites and lice and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so again, this is one where there's data to go both ways. If we have to look at it, my experience with diatomaceous earth as a commercial poultry veterinarian is that it's in the organic space. So very few, really there's no products that are labeled for use in organic to get rid of worm loads. And just the inherent nature of organic egg production, those birds are out on pasture or they're in open spaces, and so they do They are exposed to worms, and one of the really the only thing that veterinarians like myself would have to help control that is diatomaceous earth in the feed, right? And there are studies to show that it has reduced worm loads in feed, but again, it's not the way those are evaluated is egg output. So they're looking at how many eggs are the worms excreting, controlled studies of those that don't have anything versus the ones that have diatomaceous earth, and they found lower worm counts from those birds that have been treated with diatomaceous earth. So there's a little bit of evidence to show that it works in feed to control GI parasites. Now, if we look at ectoparasites, so you mentioned putting it in a dust bath, right? There's several studies that show that it has an effect on red mites, it has an effect on northern foul mites, etc. There's one distinction that you need to make with diatomaceous earth in that there are different forms, right? There's a food grade form, and there's like sort of a mid-grade form, and there's also the industrial calcined version of diatomaceous earth. And based on what form it is, there's silicates that are in there, and those are the dangerous compounds. So any inhalation of that calcined form is a significant lung irritant and can cause cancer. It causes scarring of the lung tissue. If you actually look at the calcined form, and again, the difference between normal diatomaceous earth food grade, that's mined out of the ground and it's just dried, versus the calcined version, the industrial grade version, is heated to over 1,000 degrees Celsius. And in that process, it actually turns into like glass, essentially. And so if you look at these under the microscope, what they are actually, they're diatoms. So they're preserved little microscopic organisms. But when you heat them, they turn into these little glass shards, basically. And that's what provides the industrial polishing and other things that it's used for. So we stay away from, we definitely don't want to have those calcined products, the industrial grade stuff, near our chickens. But the safer version is just the normal food grade. Now, it can still be an irritant. It's dust, right? Dust in itself is an irritant. So there's some issues there. But if you're looking for an organic, all-natural way to help with a mite or ectoparasite problem, this is one approach that you can have.
All right, awesome. All right, let me make sure I didn't miss any. Okay. The next one I have on my list, and I'm afraid to ask it, is Epsom salts. Everybody on the internet, everywhere, if your chicken has bumblefoot, if your chicken is egg bound, they're always suggesting an Epsom salt soak. And I've suggested it before too. And I would like to know your thoughts on it.
Well, so this is one where we've got to look at like outside the poultry space, because there's not a lot of researchers doing Epsom salt baths on chickens. So if we look at just Epsom salts in general and their ability, to permeate the skin, right? Skin is a pretty tough organ, largest organ in your body. There's very little, if any, transport of that magnesium through the skin, right? So putting a chicken or anything, even people, in water that has magnesium in it, you're not going to see a benefit of that magnesium. And wound healing and all the other things that are taught, the magnesium goes, there's no data to support it. Now, if we look at baths, right? So warm water baths, physiologically, they relieve muscles. We know that. The data shows that. Warm water takes pressure off. You can float in it, right? There's physics there that prove that. And then there's just the relaxation to be in the bath. So what the data would show is that Epsom salts probably aren't doing much for you, if anything at all. The warm water would be. So.
Yeah. So if you are at home and you have an egg-bound chicken, and the internet tells you to do a warm Epsom salt bath, and you don't have any Epsom salts, probably don't need to go run out to the store. Just go with the warm water.
The warm water is good. One thing, again, as the veterinary mind in me, I see a lot of these Epsom salt baths, but they're used for so many things, almost everything, right? If it's sick, a chicken is sick, it needs an Epsom salt bath. Remember, if there's any sort of open wound, or you mentioned egg-bound hen with like a prolapse, maybe not egg-bound, but a prolapse hen, you've got open tissue potentially, especially with like traumatic wounds, right, where we got tears in the skin. The chicken is going to be contaminated with bacteria, just like our skin is contaminated with bacteria. She could also have probably fecal matter that you're trying to clean off at the same time. So once that chicken goes in the water, it's bacterially contaminated. You have to look at it as being contaminated, and now it becomes a means of introducing bacteria potentially even further into an already affected wound. So I always suggest not to put a chicken with any sort of trauma or exposed tissue into one of these baths. And if you have to do it, like for example, to clean it up, you can always add, rather than Epsom salts, add some chlorhexidine or some betadine solution, some sort of antiseptic to the water to kill any potential bacteria that are in there.
Okay, that was someone's question. Is it going to help with disinfection? But you say there's better things to use for that. Somebody commented and said, the internet has let me down on all home remedies, apparently.
You know, there are truths to these, right? The truths, everybody recommending products or these types of ingredients, they started somewhere, right? There's data to show it, but really the real effects come from either concentrated forms or things that we just can't get in the grocery store, for example.
Yeah, for sure. Someone asked about peroxide. Could you use that to disinfect?
Peroxide loses its activity really quickly, and actually peroxide is not a great antiseptic for not much. I know my mom used it on me as a kid too, right? But peroxide actually, it can damage tissue. It damages live tissue. So we don't want to use peroxide anymore. There are better things. Chlorhexidine, I mentioned earlier, is really the better product to use if you're going to be cleaning some open wound. And there's different versions of that too. There's scrubs and there's solutions. So scrubs can have it's going to have soap. Okay, I'm losing the word in it. But you know, stay away from the soapy stuff if you've got open wounds. If you're cleaning, like, you know, that vent area that's all closed, that's fine. The solution is the one you're going to use for adding.
All right, you cut out there for a second. Oh, there you're back. Sorry. Okay, that's okay. My phone keeps, I should have turned my notifications off. I keep getting like texts and stuff. I'm like, stop texting.
Yeah,
we're going live. Okay, so someone said, they said, so no more baths. Okay, the last bath I gave to a hen, I also trimmed her nails, but she ended up dying. I didn't really know what she had. I think she had sauerkraut, not egg bound. So I don't know if the bath would have killed her. Sounds like she had some other stuff going on. And somebody else said, I never give my chickens a bath. We're not talking about like, oh, my chicken's dirty, I need to give it a bath. You know, chickens clean themselves by dust bathing. And we want to keep their feather oils intact and stuff. But this is like if you have a chicken who needs soaked for some reason, or the internet tells you they need soaked for some reason. So that's kind of what we were talking about there. Somebody asked about Vetericyn spray. I use that a lot for wound healing. Is that something that you're okay with me using still?
Yeah. So Vetericyn spray, if you look at it, it's a hypochlorous acid is what's in it. It's actually made from salt, and it's all natural. The pH is good. It can definitely be used as a sort of an antiseptic. One thing about Vetericyn or in hypochlorous acid is that its activity, or like residual activity, is not very long. So, you know, if you've got an open wound, you know, it's pretty dirty, that the activity of hypochlorous acid and Vetericyn is consumed pretty quickly. So again, there are, if it's minor stuff that you're trying to clean up, it's a great product. I'm not taking anything away from it, but there may be, if it's more severe, there may be other things that would provide, you know, longer lasting, better effects. So
we've had a lot of people commenting throughout this live because we have talked about a few natural remedies that are supposed to deworm, and they're like, well, what do I do if I do have worms? What is your suggestion for somebody who knows their chickens have worms, or if they are, you know, we're kind of going off topic of the natural remedy stuff, but if, you know, they want to kind of keep with a regimen, what's your suggestion there? Do they deworm every so often? Do they wait until there's worms visible in the droppings, or what do you think there?
Yeah, so if you're seeing worms in the droppings, the burden's really high. Usually we don't see worms, even though there can be significant loads, like in the intestinal tract, and they don't always come out, right? Not that they don't always come out. They don't come out like consistently. So the hen could lay like one dropping that's just loaded and lay 10 more, we won't see a single worm. So keep that in mind. And again, going back to data, as a vet, your first kind of line of defense in worms is to monitor, right? So to any vet can run a fecal for chicken parasites, right? They really they're very similar to what we find in a dog or cat. So just by bringing a small sample to your local veterinarian, and when I say small, you don't need to bring a giant bag, which is like, 4 or 5 grams, like a half a cup is enough, and they'll do a fecal flotation, and you can see worms, right? So that's probably the most, that's the first way that I would suggest that you go about it. From a product standpoint, there's one product on the market in the US, and it's called Safeguard Aquasol. And it's given through the water. So it's a relatively easy product to give, and it's a 5-day treatment. And we know, again, that there's safety, and the efficacy's already been proved for that. And there's no egg withdrawal either, which is a great, makes it a great solution. So that's one where, I advocate for. It's proven and it's effective.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I have never had like a chicken that I've seen. I'm maybe they have, because you're not going to watch every dropping, like you said. Most droppings might not. They might drop some next time, or segments or eggs that you're not seeing.
Right.
But I've never seen those in my chickens droppings. I've had chickens for a long time, but that doesn't mean that they're not there. So I tend to do, you know, keeping an eye out on my chickens and their symptoms. Are their back ends dirty? Are they acting off? Are their combs pale? If something's not right, then I will usually send off, like you said, a dropping for testing, multiple, if I have multiple chickens exhibiting signs, and kind of go from there. Or you can maybe deworm just with the assumption that they're there.
Yeah, if you don't have the luxury of sending a sample off, right? I suggest like every 2 to 3 months. It's a good practice to reduce the burden. This isn't a product that has negative effects, right? In those efficacy studies and safety studies, it's been tested at over 15x the recommended concentration. So again, treat according to the label. We don't have to worry about egg withdrawals, and you'll be good to go every 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, we need you to come out with on your website. By the way, thepoultrydoc.com. You guys got to check it out. There's some great stuff happening there, and I'm going to ask Dr. Blayne to talk about that in a second. But you need to come out with like a send away kit, or because a lot of people don't have access to a veterinarian who will see chickens. I've got about 3 in my drivable distance around me, so I feel like I'm really lucky. But a lot of people will say to me, my vet won't see chickens. I can't find one anywhere. So that is kind of hard. Somebody is the name of the dewormer, Jessica put there, Safeguard Aquasol. There is Safeguard out there for other animals. So the one we're talking about is for poultry. It's Safeguard Aquasol. I just found it at my local farm store the other day. It's about this big. I've used it on my flock before. Real easy to use. And then the name of his website is thepoultrydoc.com if you're looking for that. So do you want to talk a little bit about, before we end our live here, about what you're doing, how they can get involved with what you're doing, and what they can expect from your new endeavor here? Well, not new, but newer to us maybe.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for teeing it up. But yeah, thepoultrydoc.com, and what we're bringing to the backyard space is really board certified poultry medicine. So the tagline is bringing board certified poultry medicine to the backyard. And we're excited to offer things, just like you mentioned, the ability to submit for fecal samples. That'll be within the marketplace. Now, today we're soft launching it. So if you go to the site today, you're going to see the store's been built, but the shelves are still kind of bare. So bear with us as we flesh things out. But you mentioned the fecal samples. Think about mycoplasma and other respiratory diagnostic tests we'll be offering. Some of those are kind of already available, kind of in a beta test, sending them out and figuring out how we track samples and stuff like that. That's there. And the one thing that I'm really excited to offer today is sort of like a white glove veterinary service, which is a first tier that we'll be making available to backyard chicken growers. And so check out the site. We talk about it in there, and what comes with that. It's like a couple consulting hours with a board certified poultry vet over the course of the year. And there are other tiers that will come to as we build things out. And of course, with state regulations and whatnot, we have to kind of make sure we're following the law and state by state, because veterinary medicine is guarded or is overseen by the state, not necessarily nationally. Keep that in mind too, keeping it straight.
Okay, awesome. So I think it's going to be really great as it grows and be able to service more people. So this is really needed in the poultry space. You guys who joined us here today, this is not a beneficial thing for me financially. Doctor's not sending me any money or anything. We're not, collaborating in that way. This is just a collaboration so I could bring poultry science evidence to you guys here live for free. So we're so glad that you joined us. There is a few things you need to know. This live will be shared to my page. If you just go to like my little reels, it'll be there. I'll save it there, and I'm going to save it into a highlight too, so you can always come back to this. And our plan is to do, somebody said, please do this every Monday. Our plan is to do the first of every single month. We're going to talk about a different topic. I feel like we have more natural remedies to address that people have been asking in the comments. You can feel free to leave them here on this live right now, or when you rewatch it later, leave it in the comments. We're going to be going through those. If you have questions that the poultry doc can answer, he's going to come on there maybe and answer some questions, as he can. He's a busy man, so we're going to hope that he's able to do that. But share this with everybody you know in chicken keeping space so we can reach more people. And I hope you guys found this beneficial. So we want to know, what else do you want to know from the poultry doc? And if you could share this and go check out his website and join his Facebook group too, because there are a lot of Facebook groups out there for chicken keeping. His is really solid, very monitored to make sure no wrong information is getting out there or unsupported information. So definitely do that. His Facebook page is Backyard Chickens. Wait, I wrote it down. Backyard Chicken Keeping?
Backyard Chickens, the poultry doc, I think.
The poultry doc. Okay.
Ask the poultry doc. Sorry, I get lost.
Ask the poultry doc. Backyard Chickens, ask the poultry doc.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. I'll go link in my stories too, so they'll be there.
We, I've got my note list for this, and so if you go visit the site, thepoultrydoc.com, you can sign up for the email list, and we'll have this whole list of the document that I went over today, all my notes. We'll post it on the website, and I think Nick will have a link to it as well. So feel free to check us out.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you next month, the first of every month. Right? Is that our plan?
That's the
okay.
plan.
All right. Thanks, Doc. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Bye.